Hello, this is Neil from iPaintGirls.com, and I'm going to do another tutorial a little bit more about foreshortening, except this time I'm going to be using pencil. This is the first HD pencil tutorial, so here we go. So when we deal with foreshortening, there's some things that we should go over that are important to know, some tips that just help make foreshortening that much easier. So the first thing is why we use these shapes. It's because these shapes, the box, the cylinder or tapered cylinder, and like an egg or a sphere, are the easiest shapes to imagine like how they're going to morph in 3D space and how they're going to be foreshortened. So before we actually do that though, here's an example of what I mean. Let's say we have a cylinder, right? When you view the cylinder from this position, you have this long, you can see the full length of the cylinder. However, as it begins to tilt up toward you, you can start to begin to see a little bit of the oval. Like let's just tilt it just a little bit. You begin to see the top, but it looks oval. It doesn't look round. And this begins to get shorter. It looks shorter and shorter. The rounder this gets as it comes up towards you, the shorter the length becomes until all you see is the top. However, if we have a piece like this, so let's say we have a piece like that, right? So it's a tapered cylinder. What's going to happen as it tilts toward us, it will get shorter as such. As the oval gets bigger, it will get shorter, but it's going to be less wide. Because what happens is, especially if something's long, is if you have a long cylinder, as it gets shorter, what happens, if let's say we can see a lot of the top here, it starts to extend away from us like so. So that's important to remember. So even though it's straight here, as you begin to tilt it toward you, if it's long enough, it'll start receding into space like this, into perspective, getting narrow. So just remember that. So even though this is wide at the end, if it's long enough, it'll start getting narrower until if you're viewing it from almost straight ahead, you're going to see pretty much straight up and down instead of tapered. But that's only if it's really long. What I wanted to show is when you view this from the front. If you view it from the complete front, you'll see a perfect circle, but because you have this base in the back that's bigger than this, you'll also see that as well. And just depending on where the shadow's coming from, like that, right? So that's kind of like a cone almost, but with the top cut off. And that's what you're going to see when you look at it from the top when it's coming directly at the camera. And depending on if you put the camera this way or this way, you pan the camera, what's going to happen is you'll either see the circle more over here or you'll see the circle more over there. And then you'll still have the same lighting. Right, okay. The next thing then is, now that you know when an object is moving, you begin to see it and it begins to taper, it gets shorter as you twist it toward you, and that is foreshortening. So then let's talk about what if we have like 3 balls in a row. These aren't perfect circles, but whatever. And then you have a table here. And since this is a horizon line, we just see the side of the table. We don't see any of the top of the table. Now let's say we're going to put a camera right here. And this camera is going to be looking about like that. So you're going to be able to see part of it, maybe even a little bit more angled, just a little bit. You'll be able to see that front ball. So what's going to happen is that table is going to be angled out toward us like this, going back into perspective. You're going to see that back ball here, then the next ball, and then finally the front ball. Now I'm going to solidify the lines so you can see what it is that we actually see. This is overlapping. This is an important thing to learn in foreshortening. It's the overlapping of objects as they come toward you. So you notice that you have this overlapping of objects, and the objects get shorter, so to speak, if they were, let's say, an arm. Let's say you have a shoulder here, then you have this tapered cylinder for the bicep, and you have another tapered cylinder for the forearm, and then you have like a rectangle for the hand, right? Hopefully, okay, that's in camera view. Now I want that same thing on a table. Let's say that arm is on a table, but it's going to be coming, now it's going to be coming at me. Notice also the balls follow that same perspective guidelines here, the perspective lines as it's coming toward us. So you'd have the shoulder back there, then overlapping the shoulder you would have the bicep, but it's being foreshortened a bit, and then you'd have the forearm, And then finally you'd have, the hand, which I'll just draw as basic mannequin hand, which I group the fingers together and then have the thumb like that. So you have part of the shoulder there. Part of the shoulder is being overlapped by the bicep, and then finally the bicep is being overlapped by the forearm. And notice that's a mannequin arm, so it's not meant to look realistic. You're meant to just do mannequin arms right now. Once you start getting the shape or get the hang of doing mannequin arms and mannequin figures in general and putting them in perspective, is your mannequins will start getting more and more complex. You'll start, instead of just doing, like this for a forearm, you'll start actually drawing like this for a forearm. You might, begin to draw the actual, more of the actual shape of what the forearm kind of looks like. That's horrible. Let's do that again. So you'd kind of maybe start to draw it more like that, and then you'd have the bicep where it'll come off it. Whatever shape you decide to go with, or you might actually just start, drawing it. But that shape more represents how the forearm looks. So you'll use different shapes, and you might just start actually just drawing the forearm as it is with some anatomy and stuff on it as you develop more and more. Okay, so let's move along then. Another thing to remember is that when objects are closer to the camera, they appear bigger. Notice this pen, or my clutch holder pencil, it only takes up so much of the screen, but as it gets closer and closer, it takes up more and more of the screen. Now I have to turn it this way just to get it into screen. Look at it now. And if you get so close, it'll take up so much of the screen. It's probably blurry because I have the manual focus on. Okay, so there's a rule we want to. Another rule is that when objects come closer to you, they actually get bigger. So let's say you have a person. I'll draw him up here in the corner. Draw his head like so. I'm going to have his shoulders slightly angled down. This shoulder, and I'm going to do the chest line. The next, should be about as high as the head actually, and then the next line, and finally the third line. I'm going to have his shoulder kind of just appear back there, and then this shoulder will be coming over here. Draw his bicep there. I can start to add some anatomy here if I wanted to. I should have pushed that curve even more over here so that he's coming like that, something like so. That way he's really pushing that way. And you might just see part of this hand. Now I'm just going to draw a box for his hand like that. Right, so this shoulder, and then you're going to have his forearm. And since his hand is coming up toward us, what you're going to see, just going to draw very basic hand, group his fingers together, and that's where his fingers are going to fit into. The hand is being foreshortened because it's kind of coming at us as well. Okay, so hopefully you kind of get the idea with this quick mannequin sketch here. The idea is that his hand is coming at us and it's really close to the camera. Because of that, it's larger than the head. So that's something to, you could do when doing foreshortening. That's kind of a type of foreshortening, or it's a rule to remember that as things come closer to the camera, they get larger. Let's say you have a person sitting down, and this right here is the perspective we're looking at, and this is a bench or something. Since this is the horizon line, we just see the side of the bench. So let's say our knees then would be right, or his or her knees would be right around here. We can just draw cylinders or tapered cylinders for the lower part of the leg, and then we can have their feet coming out like that. We'd kind of see part of the top of the feet. Not quite like that, kind of mess that up, but whatever. Then the thighs are going to be foreshortened. And remember, because the thighs are cylinder, remember when you're looking straight at them, they look kind of like this. That's how you imagine the thighs. So that's like the knee is that part here, and then the thighs are that part there. Then you'd have the crotch area in here. Then you'd have the head to be up there somewhere. So something like that, and then however they're sitting, you can have their arms and stuff. So that's important to remember when things are coming at you like that you get extreme foreshortening. However, if we change the camera angle to where you're looking kind of down at the person, then you would kind of begin to see part of the bench part of the top of the bench, like so. The legs would look shorter because they're going to be foreshortened. And then you'd have, let's say, just kind of draw where her butt would be generally, like that. And then from here, I'm going to draw the legs coming off, like so. And then I won't be able to see really the knees. And then now what's foreshortened is the lower part of the leg. That part comes very foreshortened, and then you can see the feet, like so. And then you'd have like that, and the head up here somewhere, and so forth. So now you can see the top, pretty much the full leg here, and then the bottom leg is what's getting foreshortened, and I can shade in the foreshortened part. And I think that's pretty much all the rules I wanted to cover. The overlapping, and notice, like, here's just a quick sketch I did before in another video but the damn battery went out on me, is you have the arm coming toward us, and then this is the fist. And you can see that you have this overlapping the shoulder, and then the biceps overlapping the shoulder, forearms overlapping bicep, fist is overlapping forearm. So overlapping is an important thing in foreshortening. Another thing I want to mention just very quickly is you can imagine the body fitting into a rectangle or square. And then you can put the halfway point is about where the crotch would be, and then legs will come off that. Then you'd have arms, and just kind of know that that's where the kind of how the person fits into the square. Then you can put the square into perspective for foreshortening. And so remember, when you have it kind of gets shorter and like that. Remember, the halfway mark isn't going to be quite in the middle, it's going to be a little bit below the middle. And then let's see, I should have, well, just remember that you're fitting his head, so that the top of his head would be like that, and then you'd have, part of the lower part of the head. And let's say the person is, they're kind of flying up at us or whatever. You'd still have the shoulders in the same place, the hands will still go to that same middle line, then you'd have the crotch, and then you'd have the legs. Notice the legs look a lot shorter now because he's being foreshortened into the distance. What you could do, if that looks funny, because sometimes real perspective looks funny, and if real perspective looks funny, that is, even if you take a photograph kind of looking down at someone and it just looks kind of funny, doesn't quite look right, you can fix that in drawings by just making the legs longer and thinner. So they'll still look like they're going to perspective because they're thinner, but they're the same length, and so it looks right, but it also looks like he's going in perspective because everything is getting thinner. That is, everything is still getting narrower. So that's one trick you can do to get rid of that funny lookingness if it doesn't look right. Okay, so I think that's it. I think I covered everything I want to cover with foreshortening. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did enjoy this video, please go ahead and click on the thumbs up button. I appreciate it. If you want more HD pencil drawings, let me know.